Hello, I'm Roger Melko. I'm a physics professor at the University of Waterloo and the Perimeter Institute for Theoretical Physics. Today I want to talk to you about quantum many-body physics and its relationship to quantum computing, physical systems such as quantum chemistry, materials science, and numerical strategies for tackling the sort of quantum many-body problem using classical computers. So, quantum many-body physics is the study of essentially interacting particles, when these particles behave according to the laws of quantum mechanics. I'm going to use the notation n for the number of interacting particles that we're interested in whatever it is in terms of the physical system or the logical circuit that we're studying in terms of physics, chemistry, or quantum computing. So, the main central question for quantum many-body physics is really what is the behavior of n quantum particles, and I say particles in quotation marks, but n quantum species, when they interact strongly with each other, right? This is a situation that we encounter, like I mentioned, in many different quantum systems. And by systems, I can mean either one or n equals one or n equals many of these interacting species. So we may be used to thinking of, say, for example, atoms or molecules or the nucleus of an atom, where many of these quantum species interact and move within potentials and so on. So in the realm of atomic, molecular, nuclear physics, this n, the fundamental number of quantum species that interacts, could be something from, say, 1 to 10 to hundreds or something like that, depending on the species of the atom, the type of nucleus that we're interested in, and so on. So, say 10 to hundreds. In quantum chemistry, we're taking these building blocks, nuclei, atoms, and we're building up more complex molecules. Because of like a separation of energy scales, we're essentially looking at possibly different interacting quantum species. We may not be interested in exactly how the protons and the neutrons interact, but we may be more interested in electronic degrees of freedom, where these electrons form things like valence shells and so on. Again, for n's between, say, tens to thousands of interacting quantum species. In materials science, condensed matter physics, solid state physics, we start building up this notion of many bodies to sort of the macroscopic scale. And what is the macroscopic scale? It's really the idea that we have many interacting, say, electrons, or many interacting atoms in a fluid. And in materials, we can go from devices that trap atoms in clouds of 10 to the 9, 10 to the 11, maybe more, to the case where we have something like Avogadro's number. So n is typically less than or equal to something like 10 to the 23. So the fundamental thing that we're interested in terms of quantum computing is sort of what are the comparable n's to these, I guess, more traditional fields of physics, and how do we study the quantum many-body problem for such large n's? So for quantum computers, we ask ourselves, what are these n's? What are the equations of motion or the equations of evolution that govern the quantum behavior of the system? And how do the building blocks that come from, say, atoms, nuclei, molecules, chemistry, materials, and so on build up to give us these things? What I'm mostly going to talk about in these lectures is the quantum number associated with the, say, a single electron, which we know has a charge, maybe minus e, but also has a spin. So when I say spin, I'm often referring to that quantum degree of freedom that's related to fundamental angular momentum, say spin equals plus or minus a half. In atoms, we could think of higher excited states, or we could have higher spins and so on. We could also have atomic positions and momenta and so on. All of these give more and more quantum numbers that we have to consider in this n-body problem. In devices, in a quantum computer, you may be interested in sort of the engineered qubit that gives rise to quantum behavior. And these could be things like superconducting circuits, They could be trapped ions, they could be cold atoms, and so on. All of these, no matter what type of system we're looking at, all of these quantum particles are governed by essentially the Schrodinger equation. The Schrodinger equation gives us the time evolution of a quantum system. And by system, I essentially mean this object here, which is the wave function. So the wave function is the quantum state of the particle or the system of particles. Its time evolution is governed by this equation, and we're typically interested either in how, an electron or an atom or a qubit behaves at some later time. We're interested in this ability to predict its later time, its behavior at a later time. This is a very difficult problem. So for example, to see how difficult it is, we're going to take the case of n equals 1, where I've taken a single electron and I put it in a potential that is generated by a proton. This is the hydrogen atom. So imagine I have a proton, and orbiting around it is this electron. If I just consider this one-body problem, which is really the electron feeling the influence of the proton, that's essentially something we can solve almost exactly. The time evolution of that system can be essentially determined in closed form. It's something we do in third-year undergraduate physics and quantum mechanics. If I moved on to the n equals 2 case, which is the helium atom. So in the helium atom, I have a nucleus of 2 protons, and I have 2 separate electrons orbiting around that nucleus. There's no known exact solution for that in closed form. So even in this very simple case of a helium atom, there's no way that we can write down the equations of motion that govern the time evolution of the electrons. So you can imagine that analytical solutions for problems like these are very difficult. So how many qubits can we imagine that we can solve for the equations of motion for? And how many qubits do we need to solve for the equation of motion for the type of quantum computers that we're interested in building? Well, there's many different types of quantum computers, and there's many different sort of numbers of ways you can imagine building up qubits to do quantum information processing tasks. So one benchmark would be a quantum computer that can crack Shor's algorithm, say, for example, for 2048-bit RSA encryption, which is either current encryption or future encryption for things like your cell phone. So the smallest number of qubits required to break 2040-bit RSA encryption using Shor's algorithm is believed to be somewhere around 4,000. Okay, so it's roughly double the number of bits in the RSA key. These are logical qubits, logical qubits. What one must understand is that one logical qubit is often made up of several thousands, or in the best case scenario, hundreds of physical qubits. So one logical is, say, 100 to 1,000 physical qubits. This gives us a number of somewhere around 5 million. So the quantum many-body problem that we're going to solve for a typical case scenario of a quantum computer that's implementing Shor's algorithm for 2048-bit RSA is somewhere in the vicinity of, say, 5. I don't know what I said before, but I meant 5 million. Okay, so this is the essence of the quantum many-body problem as applied to essentially quantum computers.